Hello everybody, Robert Chaplin here. Thanks for joining me today on this talk. This is a talk that will lead into some of the classes and field trips I'm working in, or I'll be working at in the Florida Camera Club Council's conference. So I hope you join me on those. But what I'm intending to do today is to show everybody that it isn't the gear that makes the photographer. The gear is a tool. So for this PG-13, and my wife did ask me to please not cuss. I promised her I would do the best I could. I love you, Charlene, but you never know where this is going to go, because I do use expletives once in a while to emphasize my damn point. So having said that, the camera can see, but it can't communicate. And what that means is, or what I'm trying to convey is, that everything you put in front of the camera sees, and it sees it within the dynamic range that's programmed into the camera by the guys that are programming the camera. We can control that through depth of field and aperture, but for the most part, if it's in the frame, the camera sees it, and our job is to tell the camera what we want it to see. All right, so this talk is to be taken in the context of what it is. And what it is, again, I'm not putting down any photographers, I'm not putting down any equipment. It's a talk about getting the most out of our cameras. It's about taking our photography to the next level without regard to technology. Technology is at a point right now, it's almost irrelevant. Now, don't let the manufacturers hear me say that, but it's exactly what it is. And before somebody goes into saying, well, I'll be a better photographer if I can shoot 20 frames a second instead of 8 frames a second. The short answer is, if you're a bad photographer at 8 frames, you're going to be a bad photographer at 20 frames a second. What the 20 frames a second allows you to do is capture a shot you may miss. It doesn't make you a better photographer. So just that's where this is coming from. I'm not talking about technology and what it can do and the tools and what the tools do. So if a small hammer drives attack, a big hammer can drive attack, but the small hammer can't drive what a big hammer can drive. So you use the right tool for the right job. And we'll get into it, and I may be getting ahead of myself, to talk about our style and what do we actually need. Okay, so it's about removing, if I had a better camera, I'd be a better photographer, and I just touched on that. This talk is about creative thinking. It's about understanding the camera and lens for creative expression, because you control it. And all the settings in there, all the apertures, all the shutter speeds, everything is you control to give your creative expression. It's about understanding ourselves. It took me years to determine what my style was and what I liked and what I wanted to convey and what I wanted to show people. I'm not a portrait photographer. I don't photograph infants or babies or kids, unless it's my grandkids, of course, but then I do that. But to that end, if I'm an Everglades photographer and I'm shooting my grandkids, I do want to get the best out of my grandkids that I can. So understanding my camera allows me to do that, even though that's not my genre of photography. So understanding ourselves and what we like and what we want to do and where we hope to go with it is part of the purpose of this talk, is to maybe trigger something to get you thinking on that level. All right? Okay, so here's what I wanted to do too, because people say, you know, I have an iPhone, I'm a photographer. I'm going to give you the definition of photographer, and I'm going to give you the definition of artist as the baseline of what I'm talking about here in the direction I'm trying to go. So photographer is, whoops, wrong one. A photographer is one who practices photography. I mean, that's pretty cut and dry, right? So what is photography? Photography is the art or process of producing images by the action of radiant energy, and especially light, on a sensitive surface. Now, the reason I like the radiant energy thing, because there's a lot of folks that actually like to shoot infrared or like to shoot ultraviolet. So in essence, it's putting light on a sensitive surface, but the key word here is art. And what is art? Art is the conscious production or arrangement of sounds, colors, forms, or other elements in a manner that affects the sense of beauty, specifically the production of the beautiful in a graphic, which is us, or plastic medium. All right, so those are out of, I got ahead of myself again, and an artist. An artist is a person who creates art using conscious skill and creative imagination. And those aren't mine. I got that from Merriam-Webster online, and then the American Heritage College Dictionary that's on my desk. And I just happened to notice something here. It says conscience. So I'm learning Spanish. Con means with. Does that mean with science? Anyway, we're going to use science to create. Photographic artist. Who is a photographic artist? That's you. You are the photographic artist. You're taking your photography and you're converting it to an art form. And that doesn't mean that it's abstract. That doesn't mean that anybody that takes their camera and creates with conscious, with purpose, with imagination, whether they're photographing a child, street photography, portrait photography, night photography and stars, or the Everglades or nature, you're a photographer and you're a photographic artist because you're trying to shoot this with purpose. All right, so here's the experiment. We had a conversation one day, and it said, and the conversation, I posed it to them, to the people, and I said, I don't care what camera you have, cameras are irrelevant to you as a photographic artist. And I had a couple guys say challenge accepted. So a friend of mine, Walter, we talked about it, we come up with this plan, and then a friend of mine, Captain Ozzy, he helped out. So we used 3 cameras. So here's the experiment. 3 different cameras, 1 tripod, 50 millimeter or equivalent focal length, same settings. We all used f8, 1/20th of a second, ISO 200, white balance was cloudy. We shot JPEG and an sRGB color profile. Now along with that, we set all cameras, because these are computers, these dudes are computers and they'll process, we set all of the processing to neutral. The only one that really didn't have an exact neutral setting was, I'll share it with you, was one of the other cameras. So two were Canon, and one was a Fujifilm. Okay, and then we took 1 shot. And the way we did it, our cameras were all set up, we put the cards in, we popped it on the tripod, we took 1 photograph, I pulled the card out, put it on my computer before anybody had a chance to do anything with it. So these are the results of it. That's the shot. So that's my wife's butterfly garden. She was gracious enough to let me go out and experiment with it. And one of the things I'd like to point out when we're shooting, and I'm thinking, that's beautiful, it's my wife's butterfly garden, don't you guys like it? But look what we see. We can see too much. You can see this back here, you can see the brights back there. And this was shot at f8, that sweet spot, where the sweet spots will show you too much. That's a sweet spot in a lab. That's not a sweet spot in practical or real life. So anyway, that's her butterfly garden. That was the shot, that was the JPEG, all right? Look at them close. That's 1, that's 2, that's 3. Now just to make sure you have a side-by-side comparison, that's 1, that's 2, that's 3. 3 cameras. One was a Canon, an M50 with a kit lens, $500, $550. One was a Fujifilm XTF5 with a 30 millimeter f2.8. Total setup was about $2,400. And one of them was shot was $7,500 worth of camera gear. Can you tell the difference? I promise you, nobody can. And if you had to guess, before I put up where it came from, in your mind, pick one, cheapest, middle, high end, and let's see what we got. There we go, Fujifilm, X-T50, 30 millimeter lens, f2.8. My Canon 1DX, 50 millimeter f1.2. By the way, that's a 12-year-old camera. I don't have a new 1D or R3, whatever it is out now. That's a 12-year-old camera, and it was $6,800 when I purchased it. And that's Ozzy's Canon M50, 15 to 44 millimeter kit lens. Point is, it doesn't amount to a hill of beans if everybody uses settings that are supposedly normal with a normal lens. Here's where the magic comes in. Now the challenge was, guys, and we only had 30 minutes to do this because the sun was going down. It actually is a pretty even light. Challenge is, take your cameras and take 3 shots and create. Fuji X-T5. He got home and he calls me up and he says, hey, I forgot to put RAW back on. So these are JPEGs. And so he's got the JPEG, these are JPEG files from him. And so that's the artist. Canon 1DX. All right. And that, again, that's the artist. And we're working within 30 minutes. We had to come up with these. And my Canon M50 buddy, and by the way, he shoots an R now. So he has upgraded. I asked him to use this. So it's not in the camera. It's in the person that's using the camera. And too many people get caught up in that. And the reason I don't own a brand new flagship camera is because they're $6,800 and this one still works. So you don't need this camera unless you're going to use this camera. So when I shot races and football and things like that, this was the camera I wanted to use because it could give me 10 or 12 frames a second. And I could get the shot I was looking to get, but don't forget, I'm also putting L glass on it, 300 2.8, 400 2.8 lenses, but I didn't replace it. And I do have friends that I love, and I'm sure all of you guys might remember this, or maybe it's still going on. There was a lot of Nikon folks. Sony had some fantastic marketing. Everybody switched to Sony. A year later, I'm hearing everybody switching back to Nikon. I did get a call from a dear friend of mine who said, hey, I was just reading that Canon's got fantastic specs. What do you think? I said, you're a Nikon shooter. Stay with Nikon. The specs are irrelevant to our creating. Now, if you're going to shoot maybe airplanes and you want that 15 frames a second, I'm not even so sure that that's worth it. But the point is, if you don't understand your consumer grade camera, buying a more expensive camera and not understanding it just means you paid more for stuff you're not going to use. And I think that's what I'm trying to convey here. Want to improve your photography. So this is where we're going to take it to a whole nother level, because remember, this is the art of photography. And the art of photography isn't shooting a button or knowing just what to look at. Improve your processing. And I think we have somebody in the audience here that teaches processing. And if you don't agree, you can throw one of those tomatoes at me. But this is key for us now, because we're not taking our film to a lab and having the lab process something out of our control. We're actually doing it ourselves. So you want to improve your photography, improve your processing. A little blue heron, and I stand corrected. It's a tricolor heron. I got a damn biologist in the room. I love him though, but that's a tricolor. But if you look up here, it says raw. So that was shot raw. I did one set of settings on it, and it's right here, and that's what I come up with. Now notice I cropped it too. So I was shooting with a 400 2.8 at Shark Valley. Anybody that's ever shot Shark Valley knows, and I could always tell a shot at Shark Valley if you were shooting f5.6 or f8, because these are sticks you could see back there. I was positioned far enough back, and I was f2.8 that I get that beautiful soft bokeh that kind of defines some of the stuff that I do. But anyway, I knew that the camera was shooting flat, and when the camera shoots flat, I know I have to process it. And it's nothing more than developing your negative. And if you look here, all I did was remove distractions, which would have been my sense. Remember on masks, and I don't want to get into the weeds of actually processing. I'm sharing how I do it. And if it confuses you, just kind of keep it in the back of your head. What I'm doing is selective editing, dodging and burning, but I'm using words like lighten and darken because I get confused. I don't know what burning is. I think burning is bright, lighter, or dark. I don't know. I use lighten and darken. So where the white is at on the mask, that is the part that's actually showing through. And where the black is at is the part I didn't want to show through. So I lightened the heron. Then I had contrast. And I use contrast typically through a blend mode. And it's a blend mode of soft light. And then I could use my opacity slider and bring the opacity back. And it's the same as this. So I duplicated that and I processed that. Then I added a vignette to it. And that's it, and it's done. And I do believe most people would think that's a better shot, right, or better image. Compositionally, I like it, and there's nothing in there that I didn't want to be in there. And that's the other thing. There's nothing neutral in your image. Anything in your frame will either add to or detract from your art. That's why you want to be real careful what your background is. And that's one of the things I teach in the composition talk. And we're going to talk about this when we're taking a hike to Deep Lake, or we're going into Fakahatchee Strand, of what does our background look like. But there's nothing neutral in an image, and you can control that through your aperture and through the way you see things. And I think I was going in a different direction and got sidetracked. I wanted to show through, so I lightened the heron. Then I had contrast. I used contrast. Am I still good?
Yeah, you're good.
I'm still good. So the point is, there's nothing neutral, and you want to keep it simple. I think that's where I was going with that, is you want to keep it simple until you can't keep it simple. Now, I showed you one that had a very shallow depth of field because of the subject matter. This is in Fakahatchee Strand. You can't see it because it's not blooming, but there is a ghost orchid right there. And we had walked in just to see what it looked like this year. And what I wanted to do with my lens is I wanted to find a way to frame something a little bit different. I just didn't want to stick it in there and say, this is the swamp. I wanted something in kind of like a leading line. I understand how my camera works. I understand what I'm looking at when I look at a histogram. I'm clipped over here and I'm clipped over here. The camera can't see this, and I wasn't going to shoot HDR, but I also know if I get the important parts in this range here, I'm going to be good to go. So we notice that clipping is happening right here. So I knew that had to go. But because of the lens I was using, by the way, look up the specs on a 28 to 300 zoom, the Canon L zoom, and tell me those specs are fantastic. And it doesn't matter when you get into this situation. So anyway, that's the shot. I also want to point out I use Adobe Camera Raw through Photoshop. I don't use Lightroom because I grew up on Bridge and Raw. I want you to notice all of my defaults are set to 0. All right, and my default in my camera for the white balance is set. I control this. I don't want anything else coming up. And I'm pretty certain if you open up Bridge or you open up Adobe Raw or Lightroom, these have already got presets in it by somebody else. And there is a way, and I think I can show you here, how to make your presets your own. I went in and I took all of the presets out and I gave it a brand new preset, and it's mine, so that when I open it, I get what I get, and now I have control. And the way I start the process is, I can put this down. The way I start the process is at the top. So you see I changed my exposure. I gave it some exposure. I left my white balance alone. I was pretty happy with it. I dropped the contrast back because it seemed a little contrasty. Opened the shadows up, dropped the whites, dropped the blacks, dropped the color temperature a hint, gave it some clarity, dehaze. And then, so that was all I do. But I always start at the top and I slowly work my way down. And then I usually go back and I'll move it around and just see what it looks like. But notice this, that tree is gone. All right. So in my mind's eye, as I'm creating this, I saw the tree in my frame, but I also knew that there was a way for me to get rid of the tree. So I shot it and I got rid of it. But that's just the beginning. From there, I drop in and I usually use optics. Very rarely do I use any of these other things here. And optics, I check that, remove chromatic aberration. When I'm judging, I look for that. And it's always up in the corners or where the highlights meet the thing. The highlights meet the darks. Use profile correction. As soon as I clicked on that, it realized I'm shooting with a Canon 28 to 300, and it made lens corrections. So that's what I mean. If in the lab it says it's not good, we're not working in lab. We're working in a real world environment, and Adobe has found a way, and probably some of the other ones I don't know. I can only speak to this. They found a way to correct it. So I checked on that, and then when I zoomed in and looked close, I did have some fringing. So in fringing, I brought my purple amount up a little bit, and it was fringing in this zone. And I brought my green up a little bit, and it's fringing in this zone. I know that's a little more advanced for some of you folks that maybe don't use Photoshop. But to my point, learn the program you're using. And I do hear people saying, well, this program now does this better than this, and this program does this better than that. You should buy this, you should buy that. I'm telling you, pick one that you like and learn it. And because if you can't figure out the one you like, you'll have all the others and you won't be able to figure those out too. So this is where the tough love comes in. Pick one, forget about the rest of them. And when you become a master of that one, then you could decide whether you need to, because people tell me about these other sharpening programs and I'm able to sharpen as well as them, and not even comparing side by sides. I'm able to sharpen to get my images the way I want my images. So I don't need to have the best of the best of the best. If I can get what I want out of what I have, if I can get what I want out of a 12-year-old camera and a 10-year-old lens, I don't need a brand new camera and a brand new lens. And plus, I wonder how many people have bought cameras over the years that have equaled more than this one camera that I purchased and held on to for 12 years. So, you know, just keep in mind, we get pulled into marketing. Now, if you're a techie and you like that stuff, knock yourself out. I'm not talking to that guy. I'm not talking to the person who has unlimited funds, because I promise you, if I did, everything I had would be top of the line. All right. We still good? After I've done that, now I open it up in Photoshop. So that should tell you up there that that's the raw file. So this is the way it come in from Adobe Raw to me. And then now I start picking it apart. I call picking the fly shit out of the pickle barrel. I start looking for things I want to change. and I started at the bottom. I wanted to darken the background because remember, I'm not using the strobe. I'm in an extremely contrasty area. And so as long as my histogram is where it's at, and I still know I'm going to lose some blacks, but I knew that blown out part that was white was that tree, and I was going to get rid of it, now I could start. I darkened the background. Everywhere that's got white is someplace that I've darkened it. And these are through masks. So anybody that doesn't know mask, I'm pretty sure Mr. Tyndall can teach you masks. I put a low level contrast on this area here, which is pretty much that tree. I lightened the fallen tree, which is this, because remember that was in shadow because the lighting was on the back side of it. And that's the other thing too, is we don't always have the lighting we want. So if we don't have the lighting we want, it doesn't mean we don't shoot if we understand what our capabilities are and the software that we use to edit. From there, selective darkening. So you can see that I had some stuff that were still bright. If I'd have done it globally, I might not have got what I wanted. So it's selective. There's a few places up there and over there. I threw on a vignette. Notice my vignette is not a true oval. I shouldn't say I hate. I prefer in my work not to have a vignette that you guys look at and say, oh, he's got a vignette. So if it's off center, it's better for me. If it fades in a little bit less, it's better for me. But when you see one that is a circle or is an oval where you can tell just the corners are vignetted, to me that's not my style of vignetting. So that vignette is a little bit off center. Then I did a global lighter because I was going to print it. And then I did a global medium contrast. Now, all of these here, and the reason I didn't show you these are all part of the blend modes. And I typically use blend modes of screen for lighten, multiply for darken, and then soft light for contrast. And that's where I live. And I live with layers. I live with curves layers. Well, on this last one, instead of using a blend mode that I couldn't get maybe the contrast I wanted, I clicked on that icon and I got my curve. And I only use curves. Because in my mind, unless an Adobe tech tells me different, everything else in there is built off of curves. Matter of fact, I use it so much, if you was to type Control M, a curve dialog would come up. You could set the curve, you hit OK, and it goes away. I've reassigned Control M, or Command M for you Apple folks. I've reassigned Control M to bring up my curves adjustment layer because I live there. That's where I'm at. So that's that shot after I've processed it. And then finalizing it, that's my shot. Now there is a little bit of stylization done to it because of the media I wanted to print it on. And that's another thing I really like to talk about is media, because that's part of the art. It isn't just glossy paper or metallic paper. This will go on hemp or it'll go on bamboo. So think of the medium you're going to put it on when you're processing. But that's my final shot. And when it's printed and it's in a frame, it looks pretty good. And it looks pretty damn good up here. Is this color calibrated? I don't know. Looks pretty damn close. So, and now I'm going to show you, and we'll talk about things that I've printed. And during this part of it, what I hope to do is show you the limitations I was dealing with and how I overcame them. So we were going to ask questions. Does anybody have any questions? This is a good place for questions. No? I am just that freaking good, huh? This was one that was in the teaser, the before and after shot. So the 70-200 f2.8. Again, I'm shooting f2.8, so I get that soft bokeh in the back. And if you notice the light, always pay attention to the light. Always pay attention to the shadows. And I've heard professionals say, you shoot till 9 o'clock and then you go have pancakes, or you shoot till 9 o'clock and you go home and you come back at 4. You can shoot all day long, and you just have a different light, and you have to understand how to use it. Look where the shadows are. This was probably 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so the sun's pretty high, the shadows are down, and I just noticed there's actually a little bug there, and I got this damn thing printed out. Anyway, high resolution. So I knew the shadows I was dealing with, and I also know that if I'm photographing white and I'm photographing black, my whites are going to blow out if I allow the camera to meter it and set the setting. That was shot probably 1 to 2 stops under. And on this camera, I live 1 stop under because it gives me a richness and a saturation. And I know if I'm shooting a combination of whites and blacks where the camera doesn't have that dynamic range, I can work with it. So anyway, 70-200, f2.8, 1 stop under. And, you know, I meter for the entire scene. Years ago, they taught us with film, spot meter and find a middle gray and set your camera on manual and take the shot. Now it's aperture priority. I meter the entire scene, shoot, check the histogram. That's simple. And the reason I shoot aperture priority is because shallow depth of field. That, unless I'm shooting a landscape of some kind, you'll notice a lot of my stuff, the depth of field is very shallow. And that brings me to the lens. Those guys that are out there looking and saying, you know what, I need to get me a 50 millimeter 1.2. If you're not going to shoot at f1.2, you don't need this camera or this lens. Same for the 35 millimeter 1.4. If you're not going to shoot at its maximum aperture, you don't need it. And that goes for the camera. If you're not going to use the camera and all of its settings that make it cost more, you don't need the camera. So, and the same thing with processing. If you're not going to use everything for the power that it has, you don't need it. Find a processor that you like, that you're comfortable with, and then go from there. So that's as shot. That's the raw file, what it looked like. That's how I finished it. And you could tell I added contrast. And you could tell I even toned that down a little bit. That's why I never noticed the bug, because he kind of cropped his ass out. But so that's the one. That's printed on canvas, and it looks really good printed on canvas with a beautiful brown frame. But I couldn't get that shot. I didn't have the 400 2.8 or the 600 f4. All I had was my 70 to 200 at 200. I took the shot I did. And remember, everybody tells you the worst place to put an image is right in the middle. Not if you're going to crop it. I understood I had to crop it to get the shot that I wanted. I put him right in the middle and took the shot, and knowing when I got back to my computer what I was going to have to do. All right. So, and apparently, if you have any questions, type them in, send them in, and Jim will read them to me, and we can get it going. I like these things live because I like that interaction, that dialogue. I like it when people call bullshit on me and challenge me, because it helps both of us. I've learned more from those kind of conversations than I have from everybody just agreeing with me. And so the other thing is, I will be every day at the FCCC Conference. Even though after I come from working in the field, I'll be back to the conference, and the Florida National Parks Association, I'm on their board. They're going to have a table there, and they'll be doing a book signing, but I'll be there every single day. Come in, talk to me, pin me down, and challenge me. And on the last day, we're going to have something that ties into this and a classroom presentation. And I'll touch more on that later, but come and see me, challenge me. If you don't get through here, if you're watching it at a later time, come over, say hi, and say, you don't want to call you out on something. I live for that shit. Ghost orchid in an orchid swamp. I know that Larry's seen these 100 times, but what I was trying to do with this, and the lens I had, I couldn't get anything more than that, and it was probably 12 feet in the tree. I shot it. Now, I don't want to shoot just the bloom. Everybody shoots just the bloom, and they're beautiful, and they sell them, and there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not the orchid to me. That's the bloom. I was trying to show the actual epiphyte here, and but I knew that this was not going to be the shot, because if this was going to a judge would look at it and say, well, it probably should be in this PowerPoint, probably should be in tighter, and I agree with all of that. So, but what I wanted to make sure I was able to do when I finished my shot, I didn't want just the bloom like everybody else has. I wanted to show the orchid, and I wanted to show the root base to it. And it was tied in nice and neat here. And notice it's got a glow to it. We stood down there, and I've got a friend, I'm trying to move him around with a big old reflector. And he's trying to hit just this spot with this reflector so I can get the shot. That's why I don't have so many friends. But that was my shot. That was what I was thinking as I'm visualizing in my mind's eye. I'm imagining with conscience what I want to get out of this, because I knew the lens I had on wasn't going to give me what I wanted to share with you. The owl and the crow. I love this shot, but I want to look at it real close. Notice how the owl's face is dark. Notice the shadows where the light is at. This was an evening shot on the elevated platform at Paheoki. I happened to be just standing there with my lens, and all of a sudden the owl hoots, and that crow came out of nowhere and chased him off of a branch. So I threw the camera to my eye, and I just grip it and rip it and let it go. I wasn't shooting 30 frames a second either. It was probably closer to 8 or 10. And somebody that saw this asked me, well, what were you focusing on? And I got to tell you, everything happened so quick. I don't know if it was instinctive or just pure luck. I'll take either one of them. I don't know what I was focusing on, but he is sharp. And he is sharp. So my plane of sharpness was right. And it was, I have to look at the metadata. I think it was F4, maybe F5.6, which tells me I might have been using my 24 to 300 And if I was zoomed out to 300, I was getting f5.6. Anyway, that's not the point. Point is, with the camera I had, the lens I had, I took the shot. Now, really, if you, and it's underexposed by a stop, because at the time I knew I had these white clouds up here. Whether I was going to use them or not, I didn't know, but I didn't want them to blow out just in case, because things were happening so quick. But after I got it and started working on it, I knew when I chimped and saw it, I knew I could open his face up. I could open the underside of these wings up. I could put a catch light in his eye, and I realized I didn't need that. So Rudolf Arnheim, not Rudolf Arnheim, it's Hans Hofmann, German expressionist painter. He likes to simplify, and he says the ability to simplify is to eliminate the unnecessary so the necessary can speak. That shot's hanging in my house. And it's 60 inches wide by I think 24 or 20 inches tall. And I love it. It's a cool shot. But notice I brought contrast out. I was able to open his face up because there was still detail. I opened up his eye too. So there's times people are out there shooting saying, I don't really have a shot. And I'm proposing to them that you always have a shot. Not only do you always have a shot, I've got a talk, and I don't know if I sent it to you, Mr. Tyndall, or not. There's one perfect shot wherever you are, whenever you're there. If you're mindful and you shoot with conscious, like it said, and you imagine and you envision, there's always one shot. And my friend Ozzy is really good about this. We'll be walking somewhere and he'll come back and show me something on his phone and say, what do you think about that? And I'm like, holy Jesus, that's awesome. And so he finds that one perfect shot where he is when he's there. And that brings me to this guy. I was shooting, this is about mile marker 60-ish on Loop Road, not Loop Road, on Tamiami Trail. I had walked in because there's a prairie there that has these lone sable palms. You probably know where they are, Larry, out there. And I like to bring a sunrise up with this lone sable palm. And I sat there, and there was a bit of a haze. The sun came up. There was no real color. I didn't get the sunrise that I got. And I'm standing there thinking, now what am I going to shoot? And that's a 35 millimeter 1.4, I believe. And I look down and I see these. And I said, holy crap, there's something there. And it's standing right here and it's right where I'm at. And all I had to do was look down. So I took the shot. Now I did give a little more depth of field. I did not shoot that at 1.4. And you could tell by the depth of field, I did not shoot it at 1.4. It's probably closer to 5.6. I'm always thinking depth of field. You could have a great subject, no depth of field, no shot, or no background, no shot. You could have a great background, no subject, no shot. This is a unified whole. It has to work together. So some people get so caught up on the subject, they forget their background, but the camera don't. Our minds can filter and the camera don't. But I digress. I have to do these things as I think of them. So that was my shot. And I knew something was there. And I felt like I could do something with this. And as I'm standing there looking at it, look at the composition. You got these two weeds right here coming right up in the middle. And then you have yellow on this side and you got those on that side. And I don't know what they are. Now I called it weeds. And on our the one Zoom meeting we did, I think it was Malon that sent me a note saying call it an Everglades bouquet. And I like that. So this actually got a new title. But that was the shot. That's the raw file exactly as it is, out of the camera, without adjustments. That's my shot. That's hanging on the wall at my house. I think that one is 72 by 30. And people absolutely love this, and it's printed on sugarcane. So it's not like it's behind glass. None of my work is behind glass. Everything you can reach out and you can touch it if you want to, and it is sealed so you can. So the intent is for people to be able to engage with my art. But we should title this Robert Finds the Oil Paint Filter, because I think that was the first one I did, and I'm thinking, damn, I love it. Oh, and if there's a signature on it, it's hanging somewhere. So and then it was titled Weeds when I donated to the Rotary Club and somebody bought it. And when the guy that at the auction was reading it off, he goes, Weeds? And he looked up, and I'm thinking, I got to get a better title. So Malon helped me with that one. But that's the shot. One perfect shot where you are, when you're there, if you're mindful. And I do find my mood will dictate what I feel like shooting. Sometimes I get up and I go out and I'm just not in the right frame of mind. I should probably just go back home. And I don't think I see things because I'm just not in that right frame of mind. And I do believe frame of mind really helps our photography, a good frame of mind. Ding Darling, over here close to you guys. White phase reddish egret, exposing for, of course, I didn't want to blow it out because the camera was going to just, if I let the meter do what the meter wanted to do, and this was probably a 400-2.8, I made sure that I tried to keep everything in, exposed for this. I didn't care about that. And it's backlit, and people say you shouldn't shoot backlit. Well, I knew in my mind's eye, I'm going to go high key on this thing. So I took that and did this. So that's my little dreamy thing, my dreamy reddish egret, red morph, white morph, or whatever they call it. So here's a composition question for everybody is look at this composition. So really, he's kind of in the middle, but this wing is leading up and out. That wing picks you up, brings you here, and takes you out. Do you like this composition or that one? That one?
Yes.
Yes.
Really? I didn't even get anybody likes this
No,
one.
I like the other one.
Why? Okay, so here's a great question. Why? And this is what we do in my self-talk is why.
Because it looks more at me and not out of the image.
Oh, okay, so you're engaging with its eye, that it's looking at you. Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
I see it.
I have one like this with a tiger putting out his left hand and that flipped. And he looks as if he wanted to shake hands with you.
Oh, okay, when it's flipped. So that's what I mean. If we're creating art, this isn't editorial, guys. This is our art, and we're trying to express something, communicate with something with somebody. And we have that ability to do it. So we should. I'll tell you why. I didn't do this until this talk, actually, because I wanted to bring in to let people know that anything goes when it comes to your art. All right, so that's as shot. I kind of like this one because in my mind's eye, I hit here, I go here, and I keep wanting to go up this way. I keep wanting to go that way. And I want to keep on the eye. So here, I pick it up there, I come down here, I go up here, I'm always going back down to his head and in my visual process. And I don't know that either one is a right or a wrong way. One way, if it's printed, you guys are going to buy it. The other way, you're not going to buy it. But at the end of the day, that'll be printed. And I think I've already printed it like that. That'll be printed in a way that I like it, in a way I'm trying to communicate to you. And that's why you got to be careful with judges in camera clubs. And I'm a judge for the Kindle Camera Club. And I think judges are important. And they're important because they take something that's been created and they look at it and they give you an honest critique. Here's where that stops. Don't shoot for a judge. You shoot for you, because if you're shooting from the heart, you're shooting to communicate, and a judge looks at it, he's going to give you valuable information to be able to adjust your photography. If you're shooting for him, he's going to tell you what he likes. And you take it with a grain of salt. But those are in a camera club, these are the people that help guide us and help mentor us to get where we want to go. So I do believe that those type of things are important. And one of the things I had to learn to stop doing, is I found myself when I critique something, critiquing to turn somebody else's art into my art, and I didn't want to do that. So that's what I tell people: if you like it, do it for you. Listen to what other people have to say, because this production you guys are seeing didn't happen in a vacuum. I had help with this. I had advice. I had people critiquing it and giving me advice. But listen to what other people have to say, but take it or leave it. You don't have to do what they say just because they say it. There is no right or wrong way. I'm not even going to tell you where this is at, because my friend swore me on pain of death not to share it with anybody. The location, I call it Michael's Swamp. Some of you guys may know him. He's a South Florida wanderer. And he guided me and a few friends out, including Ozzy, to his little secret ghost orchid hole. And out there, I walked by this one spot. I was actually going to pick up my camera bag. I was going to pick up my camera bag, and I walked back and I saw this. And we're in pretty deep water here. Everybody else was waiting for me. I stopped and I took a few shots. There are orchids all in this, but I want to tell you, I put them there. All these orchids were in this swamp, but we have one here. We have a double here. We got a single with a bud here. There's a clamshell hidden right in somewhere. I got another double back here. I've got a bromeliad blooming here. There's a snake there. There's an alligator there. And so this is one of those. Oh, and right there is a butterfly orchid. So there's a lot of stuff going on in here, but none of these, all these orchids were in this swamp, but they weren't at that spot. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to show people shared with people and communicated with people the beauty that's out there, and you can't see it if you don't get into it. But I never tell anybody that's what it was. I always explain to them we had to walk around that swamp to get every one of those shots for me to put it at that location, because at the other locations where the orchids are, it wasn't as photogenic as this. So this one's hanging in my house and it's huge, and you can almost walk into it. So so what I'm actually sharing with you is my philosophies, my styles, my ideas on photography, and the goal is to take away any constraints that you have. Now, if you're shooting for a newspaper, you're on assignment, you have to do what you have to do on assignment, and you still want it to be the best photograph you can make. But at the end of the day, if you're trying to communicate or you want to share something beautiful with somebody, anything goes. And I love this picture. I love the size of it. And if we ever come over and we drink at my house, there's 4 chairs set up right by this picture where we can open a bottle of scotch and we can talk photography till we pass out. Am I allowed to say all that on YouTube? Anyway, yeah. And give your stuff a name. And when Mike come over and I said, this is Michael's Swamp, he loved it, because it's just me actually showing appreciation to a place that he guided me to. But bigger than that, if I called it where it was at, he'd have shot me. So now I want to touch on, which this will be I think on Saturday, I'm doing a talk on giving your art life, giving your photos life, making it live on somewhere with somebody. And I'm going to tell you where I learned this from. I've always done it, and I didn't realize how important it was. My mother recently passed away in early December, and I went through her photo albums, and I'm looking at all the photos that she has and the history and the life and everything that she printed out that I never even knew she had. And now I'm laying it out for everybody to see, and this is something that is living past her that I can share with people. And I think a lot of people take a lot of pictures and they go to sleep on their computer and they never get printed. I've seen yours at your house, Mr. Tyndall. You've got stuff on the walls. Most of us have stuff on the walls. This is my gallery. But beyond that, at the conference, I'm going to share with people how to create a book, or how to take your art and let it live past you and hand it down through generations, through family. And again, we don't want that just to be your regular snapshot. We actually want it to be art in your style. So that is a class that we're going to do that I'm looking forward to. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. But anyway, this picture here, 800 f5.6. So it was my 400 2.8. I was on this camera, and I was on a tripod, and it was down at Flamingo. And if you've ever been to Flamingo, at the end, there's a little cul-de-sac with a bathroom. I started to walk to the shore, and the mosquitoes were so freaking bad. I'm right by the bathroom. I got the camera set up. I'm on my knees, and this boat drifts by. And I took a few shots. And all of a sudden, I'm looking through the frame. I hadn't even shot, and I look through the frame, and I see those birds, and I fire off a burst of 3. And I think, holy crap, I think I got something here. And I looked at it, and I'm chimping, and I'm like, oh, I love this shot. Now, it looks like this, but I understand what I can do in post-processing. So I really dug it. And as soon as I glanced up, a tarpon rolled. That would have been the shot, but I was too busy chimping. But if you look right here, there's his fly, and you can barely see his line, but his line does come out when you add contrast to it. So this is the shot with the camera that I took. I knew that there was something here that I liked. That's the processed photo. Again, if you don't like, there's the fly. If you don't like the pole, you can get rid of the pole. A friend of mine with the Florida National Parks Association saw this image, and it's about 8 years ago now. And he said, "Hey, we're gonna submit to the state of Florida an image to put on a specialty plate that will benefit Everglades National Park. Can we use your image?" And without hesitating, yes, absolutely, we can. And I even designed the tag. So this is a tag they call graphic left. That means you can put 5 letters over here. So my art, if this tag goes through, will live on beyond me on the back of everybody's car that's bought one. For this conference, the FNPA will be there with vouchers to give out to anybody that wants it. Right now, they're at a seafood festival down in Marathon. We're actually hoping at the conference to tip into that 3,000 mark where these tags will go into production. And then they'll be on the back of a vehicle. Now, some of us, we want to talk about contracts. I do have a contract with this. The Florida National Park Association can do whatever they want with that picture as long as it benefits Everglades National Park. The attorney put in the graphic can be given to somebody else. I remember the words for it, and I struck it and wrote back and said, yes, as long as it's a not-for-profit and it stays in Everglades National Park. It can't go out to the world. This is for only Everglades National Park, and its tag benefits Everglades National Park. So that was the purpose of this, but I never took away my rights to do it. I've got this in a limited edition. I'm printing on bamboo paper, which is a recyclable paper. And that's what the tag will look like. But that's my design. That's my graphic. That got submitted. Governor DeSantis signed on it. I think he was the governor that signed on it. And now we're trying to sell 3,000, and we're really close. It'd be really cool if we could do it at the Camera Club conference because they are one of the sponsors. They're the headline sponsor or something, I think. So anyway, we want our art to live on beyond us. Otherwise, really, why are we shooting? Or that, again, my philosophies from my perspective. So get yourself out, find a passion. It's not about the equipment. It's about the way you see things. Now, if you find that you're going to be shooting flying birds and you can afford it and you need a camera that shoots 130 frames a second, by all means. I'm not trying to say that it's not worth having that equipment. I'm saying that you don't need that equipment if that's not your style. Understand your style and buy the best you can. I've got lenses that are probably, well, since the theft, they're not that old, but at the time of the theft, I had lenses from back in the mid-1999, 95, actually probably closer to the 80s because I was buying L glass. I was buying the best lens I could have because the camera was just a light box. And so all those lenses followed me on. Even when I got into my R, all those lenses followed on with an adapter. Buy the best glass you can afford. Don't break the bank. But buy and shoot for the way your style of shooting. It's not about the technology. It's about you, the photographic artist. You are the magic. So if there's any questions, I can answer them. Or come and see me at the F3C thing. Join me at Deep Lake so we could go through a lot of the techniques I'm talking about here and show you you could see what I'm seeing. And thank you, and I'll see you in the Glades. Thank you. Thanks for that. What do we think?
Don't see any.
No questions?
Nope.
All right.
I got a question.
You got a question?
Question.
Your Everglades bouquet shot, how did you stylize that in Photoshop, I gather?
Correct.
And you said that was perhaps offhand, but that was the oil painting.
Oil paint was the setting. And you go to filter, under filter, I can't remember, it's down, and you click on something, 3 or 4 of them open up, like watercolor. And
I'm thinking you backed off on that a little bit. It's not the full style. I mean,
well, they give you sliders, so you can stylize what you want. Here's another